Chapter 2. Gold. There hadn't been a single guilleon in his pocket when he'd been taken into the ministry's custody. What was the point? The guards would only accidentally misplace anything of value on his person. Yet, as he changed in the furthest stall of the men's loo, his pockets were stuffed with coins. Pocket money. Not enough to get by on, that would smack too obviously of charity, but some coins to cover a few expenses that Severus wouldn't feel guilty about accepting. Obviously the boy had been by Harry. Were he on better terms as a man, he might have scoffed at taking anything that looked like charity, but Severus was thankful for the gold. When Harry had first appeared at his jail cell, Severus hadn't been in any position to refuse charity then, either. At first their agreement was cutthroat. In exchange for a few meager toiletries and defense warding, Severus only had to bleed out every memory and emotion of his entire lifetime in enough nauseating detail to satisfy the boy's insatiable curiosity. Yet, somewhere between the lengthy discussion of Bellatrix's upbringing and her cousin Sirius's similar psychotic breaks, the dynamic began to shift. Oh, Harry still listened, crouching on a small stool just outside his door with his rations in a paper sack. But it was different. Something had changed. The boy could accept that his godfather wasn't saintly, the world was neither black nor white, and they both began to look at their shared history a bit more objectively. History put life into context and perspective. Without knowing the background and relationships of the people in the Order and the Death Eaters, they were just two opposing factions, the light and the dark, the good and the bad. The truth is much murkier, but then civil wars that split families and the whole fabric of society often were. Once their friendship was established, Severus was stunned to learn what the full force of Gryffindor chumminess entailed, but was cunning enough to keep his damned mouth shut and let Potter work his charm and magic. Within Azkaban, Severus was promoted to the position of prison potioneer, a position that had not been inhabited in more than 40 years. Severus kept the ill-stocked infirmary running and the bedraggled and oft-beaten inmates mostly alive. In exchange, he slept on a cot in his own laboratory. He trained 3 life-convicted inmates to run the laboratory to his exact standards. When Severus emerged from the loo, he was surprised to note Miss Granger was still there. Although she appeared vaguely uncomfortable, he could see that the girl had matured into a proper witch. Still, had he been a betting man, Severus would have dropped gold that any kin of his would have abandoned him as soon as possible. It was Snape's family tradition. As they headed down to the atrium, he continued to observe her, comparing what he could of her bone structure to the few photographs of distant relations he'd seen. She didn't look like a Snape or a prince. Her nose was too petite, neither Roman nor upturned. Her mousy brown hair, though tame in comparison to her youth, was thick and full of curls. There wasn't a Snape or a prince that had so much as a single curl on their greasy flat heads. Her eyes were warm, her complexion freckled, her bone structure average, and her lips were full. And though she wasn't a striking beauty, the witch was attractive. She was of no relation to him, that was for damn certain. Until other relations presented themselves, Miss Granger was a mystery, and he parted company with her as quickly as he could. Out of habit and nagging suspicion, Severus flew 3 times and apparated twice before finally setting in front of 2 very large and well-maintained Victorian homes. Their fences were both festooned with roses in full bloom, white and pink, respectively. He was not, however, interested in those residences. An image took place in his mind, of a stately old painted lady, minus most of the paint, as it had peeled away many years before. As he opened his eyes, it stood before him, the blight of the whitewashed neighborhood, but contained a solitary charm of its own. The gate clinked open immediately, and the manicured devil's snare hedgerow shivered at him, but held back its carnivorous vines. With one smart rap of the brass knocker, an elf ushered him in and set several locking charms the moment the door shut. Before Severus could be shown the parlor, his host appeared at the top of the stairs. "So you're still alive, then," his host said, bustling down the stairs. "Let me get a good look at you." Severus held still until she was finished with her critical inspection of his person. "You're not getting enough vitamins. I don't know what they fed you there, but you look right anemic. You should eat more spinach." "I'll try, madam," he said, nodding his head. Try was a word full of non-commitment. "Madam," she scoffed, looming over Severus, despite the fact that he was much taller than she. No doubt that horrible place has chipped away at your manners. My apologies, Augusta. I was uncertain of my welcome here. You're here, aren't you? That means you're welcome. She hurried off towards the back of the house, and Severus hasted after the older witch. I suspect you'll want your books now, she called over her shoulder in the library. I had hoped Neville would take a look at them and fill that head with some useful knowledge, but he wouldn't touch them. Privately, Severus was relieved. Longbottom's potions books were often coated in toad slime and smudge with Honeyduke's finest. Actually, I'm just here for my cat. I'd like to take her home. I'll come by for my books later. Oh, Severus, you haven't heard? Augusta gave him a pity look. The Muggles, they've done the most awful thing. They've built some kind of office building, a dreary one at that. I believe your house is now a car park. I'm so sorry. His heart sank as the rug was pulled out from beneath him. Yes, Augusta had kept his Hogwarts items, but what he needed was a home. He needed his home, some place to start a normal, stable, humdrum life, with as little drama as possible this time. Please. You can, of course, stay in Neville's room for the time being. He will be back for the weekend. The boy always comes home to visit his gran, but I'm certain Neville won't mind sharing until then. Somehow Severus sincerely doubted Neville would approve, but he wasn't in the position to decline the offer either. Potter's Killian would only get him so far. Thank you, Augusta. I appreciate your generosity. Tut tut, it's not just for you. It's for poor Aline's blessed memory. She was a fine witch and the best gobstone player I've ever taught. If only she could see you now, she clucked. Augusta had been godmother to his mom, and until Severus had gone to Hogwarts, she was the only tangible link they'd had to the Wizarding Society. As a boy, meat pies on the table meant Madame Longbottom had been visiting, and either his mom had a fat lip, or his dad had been picked up by the authorities again. Just then, his hellcat decided to investigate the visitor. Thick of gray fur, the huntress had earned a battle scar across one of her eyes, but was as keen a mouser as ever. When she recognized Severus, Ushanka lifted a paw and began to clean it. Oh, for heaven's sakes, you miserable beast, come over here. She meticulously cleaned every bit of her paw. It's going to be such a loss to have her gone. You know we haven't seen a single garden gnome since she has arrived. You could, of course, leave her here. We'd love to keep Ushi permanently. And ever since she and Neville declared peace, there's been less blood loss. The cat walked over to him with a bloody swagger and sat. You know, you really are more trouble than you're worth. Severus picked her up. The moment she was in his arms, though, Severus buried his face in her thick fur. It would blot the tears if they came, because he felt quite very near to cry. The part Neasel rumbled a happy purr. I'll sort out the tea. Augusta bustled off, the sound of her heavy skirts rustling down the hallway. Ushanka kneaded her razor-sharp claws right into his fine wool robes. She shedded absolutely everywhere, and gray cat hairs stood out on positively every color of fabric. The cat was a menace. Fickle in disposition, a picky eater, thriftily demanding, and the only real family he had, Hermione Granger included. I missed you so much, he whispered into her ruff. She purred louder.